And so this is all a process of getting to know oneself via the body. And this is done whether you do it yourself or whether you do it with the help of a guide as a therapist or a workshop leader. It's done by doing exercises. And these exercises, Dad, my mother and my father, Leslie Lowen and Alexander Lowen, wrote the exercise manual, which is called The Way to Vibrant Health. And for anybody interested in bioenergetics, it's a keystone, it's a cornerstone that should be in everybody's library. And it talks about everything that we're talking about and much more on the body level. It shows you what kind of exercises will help you breathe, will help you stand, will help with expressing your anger or your sadness. And so the first step is, as I say, getting to know yourself, getting to know where your constrictions and restrictions are in your body, a little bit where your fears are. People are very afraid of sex, and so their pelvises are locked, and they're rigid, and they don't move. They don't have the nice, easy swing of the more primitive women in more primitive societies, for example. And likewise, people are uptight. They're pulled up off the ground. They're ungrounded, and so are their ideas ungrounded. Their intellect reflects where they're at in their body. And so once you get to know yourself, then step 2 is a matter of confronting some of these things. And this is not, many people, if they get to know themselves, that's plenty. And a lot of people don't have severe problems that really debilitate how they feel or how they behave or their relationships. And for those people, the bioenergetic work just simply adds all these dimensions that we're talking about. And then, by the way, it is totally additive. It does not replace yoga. It does not replace strengthening exercises. It doesn't replace endurance exercises. It's all compatible with any sort of physical work. But it is geared towards allowing a person to get to know themselves and to gain a higher level of well-being thereby. So for those who want to pursue a change and those who seek therapy to solve relationship problems or behavioral problems or whatever type of depression or overwhelming anxiety and stress, these are problems, of course, that just getting to know yourself is not sufficient. You have to get underneath these things and understand why. Because by, in a sense, reliving the experience, the traumatic experience, and this is well known dealing with PTSD victims, is how you release that trauma. And as we have talked about, that trauma is recorded and registered in the body very much the same way as the annual rings in a tree represent the life of that tree. If the tree has experienced drought, an experienced woodsman can read that in the tree, or if there's been a fire, he can tell you exactly when the fire was, and many other things as well. Well, the body is even more telling.
So I'm gonna hop in here for a minute here.
Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the body is more telling in terms of what has happened to us in our lives in the past, and because of that, if we don't attend to that, then we're carrying the burdens of the past, which are informing our present without us even knowing it, right?
Well, exactly right. I mean, it's well known that domestic abuse is oftentimes transmitted through the generations. And despite the fact that the next generation perpetrator knows that that's not the way to be, he has no control over that. And that's the nature of behavioral, emotional, psychological problems, is despite somebody's conscious awareness, behavior, they have no control over the behavior. Whether it's impulsive behavior or whether it's hooking up with the wrong kind of woman or the wrong kind of man again and again and again. Okay? This is stuff that's affected by these unconscious constellations of experience and emotional energy that are buried and locked away from consciousness.
Okay, so a lot of times sometimes people are not even intellectually aware of these kinds of patterns, but a lot of times people are. We are aware. We're like, gosh, why do I keep on having the same problem that seems really familiar and yet don't seem to be able to change it? And you're saying that the reason for that is because we're only trying to change it in our heads. We're not trying to, it's radically different to address and to be willing to become more aware of our bodies so that we can see what's been stored in our bodies as well, and allow that to release so that we can actually have some freedom and celebrate things like Independence Day.
That's right. As long as these elements exist in the unconscious, they will exert a control that overrides conscious control. And bioenergetics, as I say in step 2, if you want to release that energy, then bioenergetics and direct body work gives you very effective treatment to do that, because you can use the body directly to get at some of these blocks, which are reflected by the behavior and the thinking consciously. So we work with a client over the breathing stool. And over the breathing stool, he can see very clearly where he has difficulty in breathing.
And what is that? What is a breathing stool?
A breathing stool, it's simply a 2-foot-high kitchen stool with a roll of a blanket on top to give it a bit of a soft top. And you go back over it, and you can put different parts of your back over it, your lower back, your middle back, your upper back, and that sort of thing. And like all bioenergetic exercises, what it does is it adds just a little bit of stress to the normal state of the body. And when you add a little bit of stress, then you begin to see where the weaknesses are much, much more clearly. And in the case of the breathing stool, breathing is so fundamental, because breathing determines, it literally determines your aliveness. As we talked about in the conference, the important principles of bioenergetics, and that was determined by life, is that life is pulsatory. And breathing is one of the pulsatory functions that is so important. And there's a lot of important things about breathing. Perhaps the most important thing is that it's the source of air, which is necessary for the metabolic combustion of the food, which provides the energy that we need to live. The less we breathe, the less we oxidize the food, the less energy that's available. The more we breathe, the more energy we have available. But even more importantly than that, just the physical pulsation of the chest. How free is the chest? If you look at primitive people breathing, their rib cage looks like an accordion playing. If you look at us breathing, oftentimes you can't hardly see any movement at all. Okay? And so, in the case of breathing, as an example, breathing is often restricted and constricted in order to keep your energy level low, so those nasty hidden emotions don't surface. Okay? And so one of the first things we do in bioenergetics in working with somebody is we increase their energy level a little bit physically. Okay? And we do that both by examining their breathing and helping them breathe and learning to breathe, because there's a right way and a wrong way to breathe, It's not just whatever. Whatever is what most people do, but there is what's known as a respiratory wave. And grounding, as we've talked about before, grounding is very important to maintain your ground. Grounding and breathing is where you begin to start. And so step 2 in the process is, after you've gotten to know yourself and your restrictions a little bit, then you begin to challenge your restrictions. And ideally that's done with a therapist or a guide, because there are typically there's emotional energy that's been locked away and forgotten that is the reason why you're restricted or not feeling this or whatever the situation is. And through analysis, which is both intellectual, because just like in psychoanalysis, it's important to understand the early family dynamics and the nature of the trauma, But then on the body level, what bioenergetics adds is the ability to actually feel it, as encouraged. For example, if a child is deprived of the contact with the mother that all children need, in an extreme case, which is not uncommon, the chest will actually be collapsed because it wasn't filled with that contact, and it wasn't filled with that love, and it wasn't filled with the mother's energy, okay? And yet, that person will be 30, 40, 50 years old, and they won't feel that loss, okay? But if you put that person into a position and ask her to raise her arm, I keep saying her, but it could just as easily be a he, and raise her arms and pucker the lips as though mom, and ask for mom, oftentimes you get a flood of emotion that comes out. All right? And, I don't want to get into, you don't want to flood the person. Flood's probably not the right word there, but what I'm trying to express here is that by using the body directly, you have real access, much more effective access to these emotions that have been locked away, both in unconsciousness, psychologically, and physically in the body, than you do through straight talk therapy.
Well, and the example that you're giving is, something that would have, happened for a child when they were so young that they were of an age where they didn't have language. So to expect that we could access that currently through our language is actually a little bit bizarre. So something like
I think that's a very valid point.
Yeah.
Sure it is.
These body awareness-based therapies are going to a route that goes very far back, to a time and a space that was pre-verbal, but also just acknowledging that much of our even current existence is nonverbal. Because we can talk a lot and think a lot doesn't mean that the bulk of what we're actually experiencing day to day is verbal or intellectual. Most of our pleasures throughout the day are not intellectual.
Yes, I think you're on to something there, and yet we have to use language, obviously. And the intellectual, I don't mean to demean the intellectual side in any way. I think that what I'm trying to point out is that the body represents highly underutilized means of both diagnosing or seeing where a person is at, on the one hand, and helping them to gain more of themselves, and as a result of gaining more of themselves and getting past these traumatic experiences, the hurt and the fear and the repressed and suppressed anger, all that needs to come out, and then a person is free. Then a person is emotionally free. And what that freedom to me means is their freedom to express anger without it coming from some historic place that they're not even aware of. That's what I call an emotional hot button. And they're free to support people in love and to have empathy for people because they feel rather than just think.
Yeah. Wonderful. Our guest today has been Frederic Lowen. He is the founder of the Lowen Foundation and also the son of Alexander Lowen, who started the bioenergetics analysis. And Frederic, thank you so much for being with us today on Be the Change, Voices of Action.
Amy, thank you for inviting me. It was fun.
Yeah, great. Take care of yourself and take care of all of the body minds that you come in contact with.
With your help, I will.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Amy.
Okay, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
If you want to look up more about the Lowen Foundation, you can go on the web, LOWEN foundation.org.